So my name is Grace. I'll be the host from today, and I'm part of MVPC's Community Matters team. So today's session is co-organized by the Community Matters team and Groundups Central at MVPC. MVPC exists to champion and support community leaders, and our teams today hope to provide resources and insights to support social starters and social sector leaders such as yourself. Today's topic is thinking about leadership succession. And the reason why the title is thinking about leadership succession is because we realize that there aren't a lot of events or opportunities to think about this topic. And so we thought that it would be great to bring leaders from the ground-up sector, the nonprofit sector, as well as various communities to learn and share from one another. The objectives of today's session are to highlight the importance of planning ahead and raising new leaders so that we can ensure that communities continue to grow, be sustainable, and increase in their impact. We also hope to increase the awareness of challenges faced in leadership succession, planning, and stories of how others have overcome it. And lastly, the second part of the session will be in breakout rooms. So it'll be an opportunity for you to pause, reflect, and share experiences with others, as well as meet like-minded leaders in Singapore. So if you haven't already taken a look at the chat, you can see the variety of leaders from across Singapore and different organizations. And if there's anyone that has a very interesting introduction and you would like to connect with them further, feel free to direct message them and get a conversation going with them as well. So today's program will look like this. So for now, we'll be in the main room for the welcome and introduction. Then we'll go into the panel discussion, which will take us through to 3:10. At any point in this panel discussion, if you have any questions for the panelists, feel free to pop them into the chat and we will facilitate them if we have sufficient time to address them. Then we'll go into the breakout discussion for 30 minutes, where you'll meet other community leaders in today's session before coming back for a share back and a wrap up. So the panel discussion will have two parts. The first part is the structured discussion, where we have pre-planned certain questions that we think would be very important and need to be addressed to set the context for the session. And then we'll go into an open Q&A, which will be the time where you can ask your questions in the chat and we will direct these to the panelists. So if you also have a specific question directed at a specific panelist, please indicate that in the question. If not, I'll just assume that it's an open question for any of the panelists to answer. So today, our panelists, we have 4 awesome speakers, Shelly, Tim, Jeremy, and Itzi. And I will now invite them to introduce themselves. So firstly, over to you, Shelly.
Thank you, Grace. It is always a joy to meet everyone. So hi, everyone. I'm Shelly. I have spent more than 2 years in the corporate sector, largely as Chief Human Resource Officer, almost a decade in financial services, and last 5 years in the professional services firm such as Deloitte Consulting, and I stepped out from PwC Consulting as the CHRO. After that, I started my own management consulting. The interesting part of being on your own has been that COVID helped me pivot differently. I happened to design a program called Leading in a Virtual Environment because that is something which was so topical. And this certification program has currently been attended by almost 1,000 managers across the globe. And this has been found to be very useful because it was very timely, this entire program. I also do executive coaching. My last assignment was when I was coaching a chairman and his rundown of a real estate firm. And currently I'm working with executive education, of one of the leading, education institute here in Singapore for their executive education. As you can see on my profile, I am in the HR committee of NVPC. I'm on the board of Teacher Reiki Matra. I'm also kind of volunteering with Cinda in one of their subcommittees. So in my free time, I want to actively participate in building City of Good, which is my passion too. So that's how I'm here. Thank you, guys. Look forward to engaging with you today.
Thanks, Shelly. Our next panelist for today is Tim.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me clearly. Yeah. Well, I don't have much time, so I don't want to talk too much about myself, but more about the work that we do at Caregivers Alliance, if you don't mind. But I'll try to mention some of those, some of my past experiences when I do the sharing later. So yeah, let's jump straight into Cal, right? So this is us, Caregivers Alliance. Been around, I think we are coming to our 10th year. Pretty young organization, not very big. There are only about 34 of us, actually 35. We have one vacancy, but anyway, what is interesting here, if you look at it, is really that more than half of our staff are caregivers of person with mental health issue. So they were people who were trained by us, supported by us, went on to volunteer with us. And when there was an opportunity, we hired them. And they have hit the ground running because they are the best people to help other caregivers. But on top of that, we also have a couple of persons in recovery, meaning people who have suffered a mental health condition. So they are also in our workforce, in our team. So yeah, indeed, we are quite diverse and inclusive as an organization. Next slide, please. So who are we helping? Who are our beneficiaries? We call them hidden heroes. Basically, these are caregivers caring for somebody, a loved one who suffer from mental health issue. And the bulk of them are actually caring for a loved one, right? So only maybe about, you can see from the statistic there, a small percentage are caring for friends and others, but the large number of them, they are caring for a parent, caring for a child, caring for a spouse, or even a sibling. And the kind of mental health condition that their loved one are kind of under includes what's shown on the chart, right? The number one is actually schizophrenia, and followed by depression, and third is dementia. But actually, it's not reflected that way in the chart now. That's because this is the latest chart. For many years, since 2014, when we start collecting this data, the number one condition is schizophrenia, followed by depression, and then thirdly, dementia. The truth is that last year, there was a complete shift. Within 1 year, schizophrenia only went up by about 400 cases, whereas depression went up by 1,200 over cases. Now, that suggests to us, really, COVID has a big impact on depression for a lot of people. But even among our caregivers community, we have so many calls from our caregivers: suicide incidences, attempts, successful suicide, self-harm, and so on, police cases, neighborhood disturbances. So the COVID-19 experience was terrible for many of our caregivers. So that's the work that we do, really to help our caregivers find a stable footing, help them to help their loved ones. I would like to share with you the next slide that relates to what the needs of our caregivers. And this comes to us as we interacted a lot with them. If you go ask someone on the street, what is the need of caregiver? They'll tell you the government must do more. But in our own experience, from the 14 over 1,000 caregivers that we have interacted with, the first and foremost need they have is how to be better at caregiving, right? How to be better at caregiving. And followed by support network. They need a support network for the work that they do, and also self-care, right? And next, respite and relief from caregiving. This is not easy, because how do you hand over somebody who is mentally unwell? It's not easy to handle that. I mean, for the elderly, for a child growing up with maybe autism and so on, there's still a way to provide some kind of respite by having people come in, stand in, and look after them. But for someone with mental health issue, it's really challenging. And the last one is, actually, they have a need to find purpose and meaning. For many of them, for many years, they are into caregiving. It's very tough. And we wanted to tell them that there is life beyond caregiving. They can find purpose, they can find meaning. Next slide, please. So how are we helping them? I have 1 more minute. Our main program is the C2C program, Caregivers to Caregivers program. So we have 3 different programs. For a 12 weeks program for a person with mental health issue. This one we've been running for about 9 years. We just created 3 years ago, dementia, caregivers of person with dementia. And lastly, for young caregivers. We've gone online since last year, 2020. Next. So these are some of the things they are saying about how they have benefited. no time, so I'll just leave it to you. But truly very impactful what we've done with them, for them. Lastly, beyond the training and the support we give them, we are into this concept called E2E, from engagement to empowerment. So it's about engaging them more, equipping them more, and empowering them more. Basically, it's about staying connected with them so that we can continue to support them. Our promise to our caregivers is that we'll journey with them for as long as it takes. So with that short introduction, I'll just pause here and pass it on to the next person. Thank you, Grace. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Next up, we have Jeremy, who'll be introducing Volunteer Guitar Connection. So one thing that's pretty cool about our panelists today, so Tim is from a charity. Shelly comes with her years of experience in the corporate sector, but also she volunteers on the board at NVPC in the HR committee, while we have Jeremy and E.T., who are the current and previous chairpersons of a Groundup group called the Volunteer Guitar Connection. So it's quite a diverse panelist. And Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you, Shelly and Tim, for sharing. Good afternoon, everyone, and hello, fellow leaders, volunteers, and friends. So my name is Jeremy, and I'm the current chairperson of Volunteer Guitar Connection. So I joined VGC, or Volunteer Guitar Connection for short, in 2017. So that's about 4 years ago, because of my love for music, and also I wanted to give back to something meaningful. Yeah, so VGC simply checked the boxes for me, and that was history. Yeah, so after 2 years of volunteering with VGC, I was nominated as the chairperson. So I was really grateful for the opportunity. And now I'm in my third year of being chairperson in Volunteer Guitar Connection. Okay, so a little bit about VGC is VGC started in 2004. So that's 17 years ago. And our mission is to bring live music to everyone, especially the less privileged. So our beneficiaries include the elderly and children in less fortunate backgrounds. And then we can go to the next slide, please. So our activities include, a regular volunteering program where we will go down to the nursing homes and hospitals to sing for the beneficiaries and to bring joy to that day. So whenever we see them clapping, dancing, or even like shedding tears, we know we have really made a difference to that day. Okay, so next slide, please. So due to the COVID-19, we have adapted and pivoted to online. It's not as good as the physical sessions, but it still gets the job done. As you can see, we can still see the residents able to wave their hands and clap along. And it's something that we keep encouraging them to do as we sing to them during the sessions. Okay, next slide, please. And then this is our Guitar Buddy program, is where we impart guitar skills to children in less fortunate backgrounds. Yeah, so we're glad to say that we can still able to do a little bit of this during the COVID pandemic. Next, please. Sometimes we also invited to perform at stage performances. So the pictures that you see here is our collaboration with CDAC and also with, I believe there was I can't remember, NCSS, I think it was during the Futai charity event. Yeah. Okay, next, please. Okay, and also a part of our activity is we train other volunteers to pick up the guitar so they can help us carry on our mission. Yeah, so as you can see here, this is our physical training sessions that was done a few years ago. And then the pictures on the right are the volunteers, the graduates from our class who actually give back by playing to the patients at one of our partners. This is Rense. Okay, next, please. Okay, and then because of the topic of this today's session, then I would like to show you the different executive committees that was formed over the years from the beginning where Yi was there. And then we move on to the committee from 2017 to 2019. And up to today, where I served for two terms, so from 2019 and up to today. Yeah. Okay, next, please. Yeah, and then we have been really fortunate to be featured in media. Thank you to MVPC and our partners as well. Okay, and last but not least, next slide. Yeah, this is our 200 strong members. We're really fortunate to have really supportive members with passionate, with the same passion and mission to volunteer together. Yeah, and we are like a family. Yeah, so I really hope to learn and share with all of you today. So looking forward. Thank you. I'll pass on to my fellow volunteer and advisor, E.T.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. And hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your presence. I think we're really grateful to be sharing the space and learning from one another. So Jeremy has really shared with everyone what VGC does. I'm going to keep my introduction short. So I'm just going to share how I joined VGC. So backtrack to about 12 years ago, 2009. Well, back then I was fresh out of JC and excited to start volunteering. So when I was asked to be a chairperson, I was like, yes, okay, let's do this. And I was very privileged to be working with pioneer volunteers, the founders of the group, to develop our vision and mission. And that is really, we want to make sure that there's no one deprived of the joy of music because of their backgrounds or circumstances, right? So being able to put that down really helped to establish the foundation for our group's activities and growth. And along the way, all our volunteers, especially the leaders, right, the executive committee, they worked really, really hard. And inevitably, some of us got burnt out. And some of us had to move on to other commitments, right? Different phases of life and that and all that. And when I asked the pioneers, say, so how there are people who need to leave, and we need more people to come on board to drive our activities. We realized that the leadership succession back then, right, was done by just trying to convince someone to be your successor, right? Just like how I was approached, someone would say, hey, I think you got very good leadership qualities, would you like to take the group forward, right? And we realized that it wasn't working because it really struck me because I realized that our job was not just about running the operations today, right? But ensuring that as we grow, we need to focus on our people, our volunteers, so that our group continues to exist tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. And that's why today's topic really excites me. I'm looking forward to learn from everyone. And I suppose, BJC has been very privileged to be able to have had partners, volunteers, and we are in our 18th year. And in fact, we are in our 7th batch of leaders. So looking forward to see how we can grow this community and also share our tips and tricks, to make sure that we serve those in our society who needs us most. Thank you. Back to Grace.
Thank you, E.T. And hello to everyone who just joined us. So we are now starting the panel discussion section of this event. If you just joined in the call and you don't know what's going on, our panelists just introduced themselves. There's also a huge long chat discussion as well. So at any point in time, if you want to chime into the conversation or if you have any questions, you want to share your own experiences, or echo someone's views, feel free to use the chat as a place in which you can get involved in the conversation. Also, if you have any questions, please use the chat as a place to ask those. So thank you so much to our awesome panelists for a great introduction. We hope that in these introductions, you have a better understanding of each person's background, as well as the type of organization they are from, as well as the makeup of the organization. We recognize that leadership succession isn't so straightforward, and it is very dependent as well on the specific sector, the context, the people. And so that's why in today's panel, the topic is called Thinking About Leadership Succession, because we can't prescribe how leadership succession can be done in your situation, but we hope that through hearing the stories of the panelists today, you will get some ideas, some concepts, some thinking, hopefully something practical as well that you can apply into your own context. So without further ado, my first question to the panelists, and I'll direct this first to Shelly, is why is leadership succession important? Why do we need to start thinking about it?
Well, thank you, Grace. First of all, thank you for putting up such a diverse panel, because I think cross-pollination of ideas, whether it is from corporate or community, just helps in strengthening our learning, because we can interchangeably use these concepts. So I think just to express the importance of succession planning, any men or women would say they haven't heard it, and Singapore is a brand conscious country. So all of us know Gucci. So Gucci was founded, in almost early 20th century by the guy called Guccio Gucci, right? When he died, the natural successor in good old days, was the eldest son of the family. So Aldo took over the business. I don't know whether he had the competence or not, but luckily when he took over the business, he actually grew the business out of Italy and grew it in the main markets, because of which it became a successful brand it is. In fact, John F. Kennedy in those days even mentioned that he was a fashion icon, the first fashion icon, international fashion icon. So that is what Aldo could do to the brand. And in my mind, that happened accidentally, then kind of anybody having put any thought to it, because that was the norm in the family-owned businesses. Your eldest son inherited it. But that was not true when the next generation came into being. His son, Paulo, wanted to kind of take over the business, power hungry, but the father Aldo could see that he did not have the capability or the right intent to grow this business. To the extent that when he did not allow him to take over the business, he set up his own side business, in competition with Gucci. And he went ahead to even expose his dad under some tax issues, which led to Aldo being in the jail for some time. Not only that, he and his Maurizio, when they took over Gucci, they kind of could not manage it very well. And it actually led to, so that I don't get the figures wrong, it actually even led to, the overall wealth of the organization, the market value of the organization going down significantly, and with a personal debt of some $40 million or something in those days. So why I'm sharing this story with you is that if you see, there is a 2 generation of succession, so-called no planning, and with not so planning, it can actually go very well, as it happened in case of Aldo, and it can go horribly wrong, as it happened in case of Paulo, right? And that's the reason when you're running a large organization, or the organization which has a high impact, in my mind, you cannot leave it to chance. It requires tremendous planning, and that is why succession planning is very important. And when we are doing planning, one is at the senior level, and we all know we as Singapore as a country currently is looking at our next PM, right? And all of us are so heavily involved in who's going to take over, because all of us are very keenly looking at who can take this country to the next level. So it is one about having vision. Who is the next person who has the vision? It is not just about managing current situation, current pandemic, current COVID, current economic scenario, but somebody who can take it forward, who has a vision, right? The second is about competence. Somebody who has a track record of high performance, somebody who has the zeal to make things happen. And the third, which we tend to neglect a lot, is the acceptance, And acceptance is, will this person be accepted by the society? Having said that, I know it is a most difficult part, because we're all trying to look for another me, another clone of myself, and I'm looking for a succession. But if we can lift ourselves above that and see who's best suited for the role, that is what would make a difference. And fourth, which I hadn't thought of it, but after I heard Hichi, is also the willingness to do it, right? When I have nominated somebody as a successor, is that person's heart and mind there to be a successor? If I'm not willing to take up that role, there is no point forcing the person to take it up, right? So I guess these are the 4 elements that I would want to add for succession planning that you may want to consider why it is so important. Grace?
Thanks so much, Shelly. What about Tim? What do you think? Why is leadership succession so important? Tim, you're muted.
I'm good now. Thanks. Why is it important? I think what sits right at the center of my thought is about the organization. It's important for the sake of the organization. I think Shelly kind of mentioned that itself. In the commercial world, it's about a loss in business value and disruption and so on. But for us in the social service sector, it is really important because why do we exist? What's the reason for us to do what we do? It is for our beneficiary. So why is succession planning important? Leadership succession important? It's for the sake of our beneficiary, not just about continuity, but also growth. Shelly talks about the vision to bring it higher, further. I think every leader who is currently in a position of leadership should not just think about sustaining, but also growing, especially if your beneficiaries pool is rather huge. In our case, in Caregivers Alliance, in 2016, the mental health survey said that 1 out of 7 persons suffered from a mental health issue in their lifetime. What does that mean? 1 out of 7, if you do the math, is something like this: 5.6 million of us in Singapore. So 1 out of 7 mean that there are about 800 over 1,000 people who are suffering from mental health issue. Can you imagine that? Quite possible. It means that in our group here, there are about 70, no more than 70 of us, right? So you can count for yourself, 1 out of 7, how many of us might have suffered from mental health issue. We can affirm that. But the thing for me is this, you are just talking about people suffering from mental health, right? But what about the caregivers? So our mission is for caregivers, right? So typically we find that there are about 3 persons caring for 1 person. So if times 3, that's about 2.4 million. So for the sake of this work that we do, for the sake of our beneficiaries, we cannot stay still, we cannot remain where we are. And I hope the next leader coming after me will bring it to an even higher, much, much higher level. That's why it's so important. So it's not just about survival, continuity, but it's really about, why are we there in the first place? We are there to serve a purpose, to serve a mission. So to me, that is really, really important. I come from the corporate world before this, and my last big company that I worked for was Siemens, the German company. Now in Germany, they have a problem, right? They need to find the next chancellor, right? But Siemens as a company went through a very bad time in their history when there was a corruption case, and practically the board and the leadership team was wiped out. And they had to find somebody externally to run the organization, right? But the thing is that external guy actually somehow couldn't fit in, couldn't find acceptance in his own organization. He was an external guy, external talent. Probably have the vision, have the competency, track record, but couldn't get accepted. What they found instead is a guy called Joe Kaiser. He's a CFO kind of background, but he has also done a lot of startup work in Silicon Valley, representing Siemens. And he was a perfect guy. Today, Siemens has outdone GE and so on, and they continue to be very profitable. Why? So being someone inside the organization, I realized something. Actually, Siemens has always been cultivating their inner group of leaders who truly understand the business, the values, and who have the network and the connection to be accepted among the next rung of leaders. So when Joe Kaiser came, he could quickly put things in place and was able to carry the organization along. But that investment in him came a long, long time ago. And I continue to observe that in that company when I was working there. Right? Young talents were groomed right from the beginning, and they were given a lot of opportunity, but it's a stretch, right? So I think commercial entities truly recognize the need to raise not just one, but a pool of people that they can tap on and to help the company continue to be able to deliver. I think I spoke too much. I better stop. Back to you, Grace.
Thanks, Tim. Oh, Jeremy, what do you think? Oh, was this question for ET?
Sorry, Grace, you wanted us to go back to the same question about why leadership is important, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you have anything else to add on to what Shelly and Tim have said.
Yeah, no, I think I mentioned it earlier. So yeah, it's just really important for the existence of the group, basically. I mean, for Groundups, effectively, if you don't have your volunteers, there's nobody to run the activities, right? And for Volunteer Guitar Connection, we are still a volunteer group. We are an informal volunteer group. and we're not tied down to, any formal kind of society arrangement and all that. So it's really down to, whether there are people around and they believe that they can make a difference together with the people around them. Yeah, so I think that's really quite crucial for VGC, and I mean all informal volunteer groups, societies, and so on. Yeah. Jeremy?
Yeah, I think that's I agree with VT and Shelly and Tim as well. So going back to Shelly's point, I like that she shared the 4 ingredients. But I would like to expand on the 3 of them, which is competence, acceptance, and willingness. So similar to these things, when we are looking for the next person, or when we are transitioning from one committee to the next, what we'll do is we'll also look out for people who can have the competence, right? Who's able to not just have the soft skills, but also the hard skills. Because I think for our group, we need people who, for example, at least can train people in guitar, or even and also to be able to manage the volunteers in terms of emotionally as well. So competence is one thing, I totally agree. And also acceptance, right? I think in VGC, what we do is we have volunteers, we allow active volunteers to vote for the next chairperson or the next leader. So in this way, it's quite, it makes it fair, and it gives the volunteers the voice to choose their leader. This automatically allows them to accept the leader, the new leader. Yeah. And also finally, the willingness. I remember E.T. was asking me if I'm okay to take it up. The funny story is initially I actually didn't want to take it up. Yeah, but E.T. kind of just, she persuaded me. Yeah, but it's good that she didn't like force on me, because it's really important to have the leader to be willing and to step up on their own. Otherwise, if it's forced, then the leader will eventually just quit very quickly. Yeah. So yeah, I just like to expand on these 3 points.
Thanks for sharing, Jeremy. I think definitely the invitation is so significant, because sometimes people may not even be considering a leadership position, but when someone in authority or someone they respect comes to them and says, hey, would you consider leading, or would you consider taking up this role? That's definitely a time, and even that person that you as a leader identify, right, can just start being open to it. Sometimes it also takes time to marinate or to welcome a thought that was just not on the radar of life plans. Yeah. Shelly, I have a question for you, which is, what makes good leadership succession, or like how do organizations start planning for leadership succession?
Yeah, so actually I can see there are some of the questions even on the chat on the similar lines. So let me answer, Grace, what you're asking, and also some of the questions which are on the chat about internal and external successor. So I think there is a slide there on the 9-box model, which is about the talent pipeline,
Yes.
So if we can share that, so let me use that as a slide to talk about. So if you look at this slide, succession, it is not about like, oh, I'm planning to step out, in the next 6 months. Now let me just start thinking, who's the person who can take over from me? I think in my mind, it's too late. In any large organization, and I can share that with my corporate experience, is, what we have something called talent management framework that we use, where succession is planned for all critical roles in the organization. And using this 9-box model, where there is an element of performance and potential, when you kind of put that, matrix, a 3x3 matrix, you can see all the green boxes on the right side in the 3x3 matrix are your potential candidates as successors, because they have shown consistent performance in the organization, and they have consistently shown high potential, to grow in the organization. So somewhere there is a willingness, somewhere there is a connect with the organization, they understand the organization, they can navigate. So if they are given higher role, they will be very well be able to take this over. So if you manage this internal talent pipeline very well using this 9-box model, at any point in time, you will have multiple candidates, in your bouquet to choose from when the time comes. It is advisable. I can see a question which talks about internal successor versus external successor here. It is highly advisable to look for a candidate internally if possible, And while we are talking, I have searched for an article for you guys. I've sent you a link on this by Marshall Goldsmith. So just, if you guys get the time to read it, feel free to read it, However, I completely take the point that one of you mentioned in the chat, that what if I don't have a potential successor internally, right? If you do not have one, please do not hand over the reins to somebody who's not capable of handling. By all means, go out and look for a potential candidate. In such a situation, the current CEO or the current leadership has to work very, very hard to make the person acceptable. It is not about, okay, I hereby choose Grace externally to come and take over my position, and I just leave it to her and I say tomorrow onwards, I'm not responsible for it. It's my responsibility to shadow Grace for a year, year and a half, and two, to create that acceptance for her, to create that environment for her so that she can excel and act as a bridge between the people and Grace so that she can settle down in that role, So I think that is where external candidate, there's a little bit more work that is needed when you're doing succession planning, And that's the reason people prefer using many internal candidates, because they understand and they can navigate internally very well.
Thank you much. Thank you so much, Shelly, for elaborating on that. And I think it's a perfect opportunity now to move the question to Tim, because my next question for him is actually about how is leadership succession being done in Cal? Or what have you done so far in trying to identify and raise new leaders for Cal?
Can I tackle that later?
Oh, sure.
I want to talk about the same question about what does it entail? And I want to share from the perspective of a big organization and a small organization. Because actually, if you're a small organization, there's not even a career roadmap possible. It's just not possible, right? How do you create a career roadmap? Much less, in a way, succession planning. But there are ways to get around it. But let me start with big companies. So the nine box that Shelly shared, I've seen that applied in many organizations that I work for. I was doing high potential development, or what you call CEO succession planning, many levels down. So we are working with the vice president's level and senior department head in Maybank, right? And what is needed in a succession plan for a large organization, and they can afford that, is that you really need to have a talent pipeline, as Shelly talked about it, right? And having a talent pipeline is about enough people that you think and you have access to be suitable. So again, organizations have ways of assessing potentials. What criteria do they use to determine whether somebody is suitable or not? So you have an inkling of that just now. So what I learned over the many years are that, and I want to share this more because for some of the younger ones here, I want you to think about some things that you may want to develop or focus on for yourself, so that you could be a possible potential, right? And it's good for you as well. So there are 4 things that I've come across that is really what I call the criteria for selecting someone with leadership potential, right, or succession potential. So the first is cognitive ability, right? Your ability to think. Second is your people ability, how you handle people, how you manage people, how you live with people, how you build trust. The third is really about change and learning agility, because this is our world, right? It's constantly changing. A person who has that agility, very fast to learn, to change, that will do very well. And to me, the last one is actually motivation and resilience, right? They must have the determination to carry things through. Of course, they need to be wise to know when it's really a hard war, there's no point. But these are some of the things that organizations think about when they look at somebody. The more sophisticated organization, they put you through, leadership assessment stations, right? So these are what the big companies do and what they can afford. But I think when I go back to the question of what, I feel that succession planning is something that actually should involve not just the present leadership team or the board. It should also be involving managers on the ground. They must help to identify who in your direct reports might be suitable, right? Putting somebody through an assessment test, not necessarily the best way to do it, right? Personally, I don't feel so, but it's through a prolonged period of observation, testing somebody out, stretching the person out, then you slowly identify. And in my experience, we have a few categories that we put on paper. In Siemens, I used to manage a room, we call it the Obeya room, right? It's one big room, and then we have sliding boards, and we have a list of all the top talents in Siemens ASEAN. Who are they? And we categorize them as ready now, ready future, long-term candidates. So there are ways that you can manage this. Big companies can afford that. Now we go back to, okay, before I jump into that, I also want to talk about something that we introduced in Siemens called collective succession planning. So typically we depend on the top guy to decide who should be replacing him, right? Or the next level down. But one thing we discovered is that it should involve the top team. Having the top team come together, discuss people, look at their development needs, and constantly keep an eye out for these talents to make sure that when the time comes, they are able to all agree that these are the best bets, right? So yeah, so again, I'm sorry, so much to talk about just on the big company front. Now maybe I just move on to a small company like Cal, right? How do we do it? I think that will answer Grace's question. If you don't mind hanging on with me for a while more. So for a small company like Cal, well, we also talk about succession planning. In fact, right from the start when I joined, the board was clear to tell me that I need to plan and coach and help one or two of my colleagues who are identified as possible ED in waiting, right, to take over me. And that's what I've done. First, second year, I test them out, I push them, I see what they can do, I involve them, and so on, right? So last year, I was forced to come up with something in writing, a succession plan, right? So my board asked me to write that out. How did we do it? So I recommended to them what I learned in the Navy, which is worst case scenario and best case scenario. The best case scenario is I have 2 years to help somebody, train somebody so that he or she can take over me, right? That's the best case scenario. Coaching, walk at least one cycle of a life, a day a year in the life of an ED. The worst case scenario is I have 2 months, or the company has 2 months, because if I tender, I have 2 months, and then that means the company only have 2 months to search for someone. Is it difficult? May not be difficult, because some board, if they are actively always engaged in the social service sector, or maybe even outside of the social service sector, maybe you will already have in mind some people. So when there is a crunch, you bring in the people, you interview them, let the rest of the board interview them. Maybe that's somebody suitable. In my case, I was never in the social service sector, so I was brought in cold, right? They took a bet on me, okay? In the same way, I was telling them the same thing. You need to take a bet, perhaps, just like Shelly said, if there's nobody internal, you have no choice. You have 2 months to seek out somebody, but don't wait for that to happen. So I told them right from the start, as leaders, whether you're a board director or myself, we should be actively looking out, right? Engaging with the social service sector and beyond. So in my own experience, I have a few names in my, I wouldn't call it a black book, but it's a white book, that one day if something happened and I need to go, I will give this list to the board and say that these are people you can consider, because I work with them. I think they might be suitable, depending on where Cal is headed in our next phase, right? So sometimes plans are easy to do, but you park it there, it has to change because things change, things move. I think one of you mentioned that just now, that as a company evolve, the vision and the plans should change as well. So whatever succession plan you put on paper, be prepared to take it out and if necessary, tear it apart and start all over again, because the organization does develop and change. So for myself also, to involve the middle manager, simple things like, do we have a performance roundtable where I involve the managers to give comments about performance within the organization? Let them look across their department to see other people, other high potential in other department, other team, so that collectively as a team, we look at succession planning together. In fact, that's what we introduced in Siemens. I used to conduct 2-day sessions annually with Siemens CEO, division CEO, business CEOs, where we huddle together as a collective leadership team, and we go through names, people who might be suitable. Where are the gaps? Where are they now? How do we classify that? So I'm trying to replicate that into my current experience with KL, a small organization. And I think the common thread is really about involving more than the leader, involving more than the board directors in this search for people, for talents. So these are some of the things that I've tried. I don't think I can write a paper about it at this moment. My experience is only 3.5 years, so nothing to boast about. But you have to put in place things. And this goes to where I hope if you can't remember what I said, let me just wrap up. You can't remember what I said. Maybe there's something I want to leave with you. Succession planning is not about finding a successor. Succession planning is to make sure that the organization succeeds. So beyond looking for that one person, you have to be constantly building the organization so that even if it's a wrong choice, someone coming in, there's no problem because the organization is cushioned for the worst case. There are next bench leaders in place, processes, systems, and so on. So there shouldn't be any problem. So with that, I'll pause and just hand the time back to Grace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim, from drawing from your experiences in the past and even with Cal. Definitely in larger organizations versus smaller organizations, the considerations are so different. But the principles that you shared, I really love the 4 points that you talked about. And thanks to everyone also who's continuing to comment and add questions in the chat. At this point, we'd just like to hear from ET, how is leadership succession done in VGC and in the context of a smaller volunteer run, no staff, right? Everyone's a volunteer. Like, how is that? What does that look like in that very unique context?
Thanks, Grace. So as I shared earlier, previously that was, I think more than a decade ago. It was done in a very informal way, right? You finding your own successor and all that. But since then, we've established a formal process, which I think many societies or even most groups would be familiar with, and that's having an elections process, right? So allowing people to nominate themselves or somebody whom they think is suitable, and then having some kind of voting process to decide on the leader. I think many of your organizations probably have this in place, right? I'm seeing many established societies here, so I'm also very humbled to be in the same space. But just hearing from the conversations that have happened so far, I think we share very similar issues, right? And our wicked problem, I suppose, is about how do we set the conditions for leadership succession to take place easily, right, and effectively. Right, and I think Shelly talked about willingness, suitability, acceptance, and then Tim talked about going down to the manager level, right? So for VGC, I think how we try and set the conditions for leadership succession to take place, one very important thing to consider is how can we expand the way we think about leadership, right? It's not just about the top person, right? The chairperson of the volunteer group, but we need to grow leadership at all levels, right? Because it being a volunteer group, it's like you go for a regular 9 to 5 work, and then you go for your volunteer work after work hours, and then Saturdays and Sundays, right? So it can be very, very tiring. And as a volunteer group, we don't have middle managers, but similarly, we need to figure out a way to go down and help every member, every volunteer, take a role of leadership in their own way, right? And understand where each person is at. This could be in little projects, helping out back end on some of the processes that we need to settle, could be ad hoc projects, whatever they can manage, right? Especially based on this short time commitment. And that is where we can see how each member can contribute. At the same time, we also get a sense of the diverse assets and the diverse capabilities in our volunteer group, right? Similarly, I guess for any organization. So that's my first point, I think, to look at leadership at all levels. And the second point, I think quite similar to what Tim has mentioned, is really focusing on personal growth, right? And I want to expand a little bit on what Tim shared, right? I think it's important for volunteers or even team members in an organization to see their leadership role as being useful not just to the group, right? Because very often when we serve in the social sector, we see ourselves as giving, right? We're trying to lead the group, trying to shepherd the processes, but we neglect personal growth, right? So very often it's easy to get caught up with all these ops, and I think our approach has to also help them focus on how, throughout this process, you also grow as a leader, right? For us as a volunteer group, your growth is not constrained to just how you contribute to our volunteer group, but also in your career, right? Also to you as a whole person, right? And I thought that was really important to also remember, because that is how we can help the person also see that the role is meaningful for himself or herself, right? Yeah, so just two thoughts from me. Leadership at all levels, and also focusing on the personal growth so that, we enable the conditions for leadership succession, whoever comes up, to be able to take on the reins and for people to see them as leaders as well. Yeah.
Thanks, E.T. Jeremy, do you have anything else to add on to that?
Yeah, just a quick sharing from the point of view who got nominated as the leader. I think from my past experience, how I got nominated is probably because I was quite involved in a number of volunteering activities. So I was also given the opportunity to lead certain sessions. For example, whenever there's new volunteers coming in, and then I was given the opportunity to onboard them to the program. And also, for example, whenever we have an event and we need people to run that event, then I was also given that opportunity. So I think because of these opportunities that I was given, then I think my fellow volunteers saw that I was kind of capable to take on a bigger role and eventually the chairperson role. So I think it's giving these opportunities to people or volunteers at all levels, as E.T. mentioned, so that we not only groom them as leaders, develop them as personal in their personal growth, but also we are able to groom our future leaders as well. Yeah, I think there was a question on like how do we manage to allocate leadership tasks to every individual by training. Yeah, so I think we can start small. Give volunteers certain tasks that they're comfortable doing. For example, if this volunteer always comes to this specific program, then let's just try one session and ask this particular volunteer to maybe lead the program or onboard new volunteers. So take baby steps so that we don't scare them off too fast. Yeah, and then when they're ready, they can take on more responsibilities. Yeah. Yeah, back to you, Grace. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy. Now we're going to take some of the questions from the chat. Shelly, would you like to address some of them?
Yeah, so I think I can see Rubaya, Azhar, Fungyon, and I think Anil, you've raised certain issues. So let me just club them and give you some structure, all the four of you that you've written. So one of you have asked me is that if you announce that this is the likely successor or this person is a talent pipeline, does it create unhappiness? And does it then make the others leave the organization? This is a double-edged sword, guys. This is one question which I've been asked repeatedly, even in large organizations, right? If I tell you that out of 71 of us or 83 of us, these are the 10 people who are the possible successors or the bright sparks in the organization, I'm making the other 70 unhappy, right? But if I don't tell and I just let it be, I don't have, The high performer guys, they say like, okay, you treat me the same as others. There's no extra investment you're doing for me. This is not the place for me. I'm going to quit, right? So I think it's a double-edged sword. So in case, since the implications on both sides are very high, I'd rather be transparent. You know, the transparency brings a little bit more acceptance and wisdom. But having said that does not mean if I'm saying, you know, Ruvea is a high performer, that doesn't mean I'm saying the rest of the people are not important in the organization. What I'm trying to say is there are a lot of core contributors. To row a boat, we really need a lot of rowers, right? And they generally may not have an achievement orientation where they're looking to become CEOs of the organization. They're quite happy to come and just row the boat and go. There is only few set of people who are looking to be the commander of the boat, right? So we need everybody in the team. We need core contributors. We need people who are managing critical processes and they bring specialized skill sets. And we need people with high achievement orientation. There is a space for everyone. It's just that we need to navigate this conversation carefully by addressing everybody's needs appropriately, right? If at all there is a confusion, my personal leadership style has been, I rather err on the side of transparency than hiding it and keeping it under cover. You know, Naslin, you're a high performer, but don't tell anyone. Trust me, everyone knows she is, you know, and I'm not telling that means I'm doing something behind the back, right? Which is worse in my mind. All right. So now talking about the 9-box model, I think Ravea, you asked for it. If you look at the 9-box model, you know, there is a performance. So all of us have very elaborate performance management system, right? By virtue of that, we continuously measure people's performance over a period of time. So we know our consistent performers, right? You are getting A rating every year. You're getting 1 rating, which is the best rating every year, right? Then there is something called potential assessment. So potential assessment is either kind of done by the committee of leadership, where they say, this person has the capability to do higher roles in the organization. This person is showing, you know, some strength in be able to partner with the external world way more. So we are constantly judging that, or there are even potential assessment tools which are available. So depending on how you want to kind of bring the potential element, you bring that in, right? And that's the reason I said in this 9-box model, if you see, you know, your green boxes are the ones typically would kind of be reflective of who could possibly be your successor. Some successors could possibly, your talent pipeline could come from these boxes, right? Having said that, you could possibly be surprised because these are not static situations. People can move across the boxes, right? I could be in a green box this year. I could fall back to the yellow box next year, right? So you need to see the consistency of the performance over a period of 4 to 5 years to be able to say that, okay, Shelly, out of 5 times, 3 times she has been in the green. So probably I can look at her as a successor. Those 2 times there could have possibly been a personal situation, you know, because of which she slipped down to the yellow, right? So that is what the 9-box model does. It's a very beaten, old, very conventional model, Robert. You know, so I'm not saying that follow this. I'm just trying to give you a little structure. Inspired by this, you can create your own model, you know. But when it comes to hiring a person from outside, you know, and I think one of you asked that question, when I get to know that, oh, I am so hardworking, I'm so deserving of this position, but my manager, my CEO is constantly looking for somebody from outside, then why should I be putting my energy, right? It's very, very important to have a conversation. And it does not mean that you're saying, I am going to go. So you are in the consideration set. I'm also evaluating somebody from the outside set. Together, let's see who can take this over at the end of it. I'm not saying you can never make it. In this coming 1.5 years, if you shape up well, and if you show that promise, possibly you could also be in the running. But I'm creating, as I use the word, bouquet of successors, you know, from where I can choose from at the appropriate time. And when I'm using the word I can choose from, it's not a one-person decision, trust me, guys. It's a board decision, right? The board decides who the successor would be. So a single person's wisdom versus the collective wisdom of the board. you better accept the collective wisdom of the board, even if it's an unpleasant outcome that you don't like. Give them a chance that there are a set of smart guys sitting at the top who have collectively taken this call, right? Just give them a chance and trust their wisdom and go with it instead of doubting it. So that's the way I kind of personally look at it whenever I'm managing these situations. I hope it answers your question. Great.
Tim, E.T., Jeremy, anything else you'd like to add on to that? All right, at this point in time, we have about 5 minutes left for the Q&A. So if anyone has additional questions that you would like to ask, feel free to pop them into the chat. If not, I'm going to ask one question. Maybe I'll direct it to, actually, I'll just open it up to anyone who would like to answer it. It's what would make leadership succession fail?
Say that again, Grace. You said why do?
Yeah, so what would make leadership succession fail?
I have had different situations, frankly speaking. And again, my example, sorry, pardon me for this, guys, is largely from the corporate world because that's where I've spent most of my time. One situation I've had is, COO of the organization, because has been seen as a natural successor. It is why? Because the COO has an oversight to many support functions and the large, they may not be looking at the just the frontline businesses, but they have a back-end processes they're very good at, governance, HR, administration. So they are seen as a natural successor, sometimes. May not be the best idea. I'm not saying you should not, but don't kind of see that as a natural successing progression, because a COO, more often than not, because of the nature of the job that they are cost managers. They are managing their day and night, are thinking about running the organization efficiently. They don't have an investment mindset that if I were to put this $10, it is going to multiply my organization by 3 times, right? So if you're looking for a COO as your successor, see that person has the vision and has an investment mindset. If they are largely cost managers, then you may want to think about it. So in that situation, many a times, the succession has failed. Second, very common is the acceptance issue. The person is a high-performing guy, got tremendous vision, young, dynamic, comes and takes over, but the team is not ready to report to the individual, And in that situation, many a times you end up compromising and start taking the second best person in the organization who's got a great acceptance. But, if you don't have an acceptance in the organization, that can again derail you, So that is another one that I have seen. I rarely doubted that you would promote somebody to be a successor if the person doesn't have a competence. So I don't have a case study where an incompetent person has been nominated to be a successor. That consciously does not happen. If it happens by mistake, then I don't know. So these are the 2 situations I can talk about. And I think let me get Tim and Vinci and Jeremy to opine on it,
I would like to offer a comment on that. So, I mean, don't be too quick to dismiss a COO, because essentially a COO means somebody who is able to deputize. He could be a CFO person, he could be a technology person, he could be anybody. But if the organization thinks that he's well-rounded enough, has accumulated enough experience to step into the CEO job, I think that should qualify him. And the whole idea of COO is that he runs operation, he runs everything. And in a way, he's number 2 in the company. So I think don't be too quick to look at what is his background. Like I said, Siemens, the person that I admire most for bringing Siemens to the next level is a CFO, actually. And then the current CEO is actually a chief technology officer, but he used to be a CFO as well, and COO, running operation and sales. So you need someone who has a lot of qualities, because at the top level, you need someone who can cover all grounds, right? Marketing, I mean, basically that's what I'm doing. I'm doing marketing, I'm begging for money, I'm doing fundraising. I'm responding to operation, I'm making decision on HR and so on. So for small charities, I mean, for maybe small organization, you have to pick your number 2 to be a very well-rounded person and use the opportunity when he's holding the role to groom him, to test him out, to let him have a feel of running the organization. And this is where I also want to say that I went that route initially, thinking that I need to make it clear that we have a ED in waiting, a number 2, a COO. But I also realized that maybe that may not be a good way, in the same way that what Shelly said, that sometimes it's not good to identify the successor too early. So when we did the succession plan in 2020, I proposed something different. I asked for 2 senior headcounts. So instead of depending on one person who people would think is quite naturally because he or she is handling ops to be the next CEO, we now have 3 positions with 3 highly experienced people. And one of them is in charge of corporate comms. One of them is in charge of ops. And then one of them, is just in charge of general, everything else that the company needs to deal with, corporates. So now I have 3 persons to select from. And the verdict is still out, because I will test them out. I will see, who really can lead the rest, and people will look up to that person and say, this is the guy we will follow. So that's what I also think, that don't just put your bet on one single person, have a pool that you can tap on, but the responsibility of the CEO, the responsibility of the board is to really spend time to test them out, stretch them, push them, and see how they do it. Because I think for me, I always remember, it's not just about competency, what we call the can, you can do it, but it's also you want to do it. So if you don't have the motivation and the resilience, may not be a good bet. Yeah. So I would advise that. So it's not one single person, it is a pool of person. But I'll even recommend that sometime you need to think about the next level down. It could be a very, very young person who is extremely smart, and because you have kind of given him the opportunity to understand what the company is all about, this person may jumpstart, leapfrog over the rest. What's wrong with that? If he can win the respect of everybody else, we can try that as well. So I always try to hint that, it's not straightforward, but like what one of you wrote, it also depends on, at that stage in time, where is the organization? How is CAL? Where are we? What's the vision for CAL? And maybe it may not be one of these 3, the next level. It could be a leapfrog from somebody else, or maybe somebody from outside. So I think succession planning, we have to see that it's not straightforward. Depending on organization, depending on situation, it varies. It's just to have a very agile mind to say, what's best for the company and who might be the best person at that time. But even after you did all that, you may still be wrong. So then you adapt. And that's why I said it's important not to depend on the successor for the success of the organization, right? If you are the leader of the organization, you should work very hard to make sure that you bring your organization to the next level, more functional, more effective, more efficient, so that even if you make a wrong choice, right, the organization will not collapse because the organization is stronger and is able to jump to the next level, right, supporting the next leader that you appoint. And hopefully the leader will be able to bring them along, right? So that's my thoughts. Again, I don't claim to know everything, so I'm still experimenting, but it's good to have this sharing session. I come from the corporate world as well, executive coaching and so on. It's easy to think that there are certain templates and so on. Sure, they guide us, but I think for running a small organization in the social service sector, you need to be very, very flexible, adaptable, and agile, right? Because I don't think it's the same, right? So thanks for that. Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, so we're going to have to wrap up our panel discussion here. But thank you so much for our panelists. But before we close, I do have one last question, and I want to direct this to Jeremy. And I think it's a very unique position where he's here as someone who's taken over from ET. So just want to direct this last question to Jeremy about, as someone who has taken over from another leader, what would be like a piece of advice you would give to an outgoing or incoming leader?
The piece of advice that I would give is to probably take it on proudly. So when I was chosen as the chairperson, I was quite intimidated at first, to be honest. I didn't know what to expect. I've never been a chairperson or a formal leader, even in my company. But I went with the reassurance that I was chosen by my fellow volunteers and members, and also supported by the advisors and the founders. So based on this reassurance, I felt that I felt confident, more confident, and willing to take on the role. Yeah, but at that point, I still don't know what to expect, and I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, but it's really the support from the advisors and also my fellow committee members as well. It also helps that you know them as a person, so that you don't feel alone. You feel like you're supported, and you can overcome challenges together. Yeah. So it's really the reassurance that you have a team to support you, and you're not just alone to carry the ship forward. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. E.T., you want to add something?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna add something real quick in relation to your last two questions. Your first one was what would make leadership succession fail, right? And to be honest, I when I first handed over to the second elected chairperson, I felt like I really failed, right? Because back then we focused a lot on the ops, the what do we do, right? This is what recruitment does, this is what welfare does, this is what the social media team does, right? And make sure that she's got the ops under control, right? But what we forgot about was alignment on the why, right? The sheer purpose of why our organization exists, what is our vision and what is our mission. And if we're not aligned on that and the next leader comes over, he or she might then start new projects that are not aligned to what you set up the group to be, right? And that's why I think it's important to make sure you have alignment on that. And to your last question on the advice for someone who's incoming, it's also about the why, right? Ask the why questions, like why is it that our organization does things this way, right? Why is it that our mission and our vision is articulated in this manner? And I think that would really help give you a sense of whether you yourself believe in that same cause, right? Because it's important, that it gives you the energy, it gives you the strength to do what you do. And if you don't see meaning in it, we're not going to last very long this journey, right? So that's what I just wanted to add. Really thinking about the why and the purpose, our vision and mission as we do what we do. Yeah. Thanks, Grace.
Thanks so much, E.T., and thank you to all our panelists for sharing. Now we're going to move on into the next section, which is on the breakout rooms. So some of our panelists will also be joining the different breakout rooms. So you have an opportunity to get to know them a bit better as well, and to ask them any questions if you do have. So the next 30 minutes will be in breakout rooms. So an opportunity to just get to know one another, share about yourself, your organizations. And the main question for discussion really is, we hope that this breakout room will be a chance for you to digest from everything that has been said so far. What is a takeaway that you've had from today? And maybe we can just go directly into, what is something new that you can do in your own community based on what you've heard today. Yeah, so that will be the next 30 minutes. And before that, we're gonna do a group photo.